All right, we're going to get started in about 3 minutes or so. Put my coffee down. Thank you. I didn't want to be on camera with that going on. Next thing I need is somebody to do my makeup for the camera. You may need to bring a comb with you. Just comb it out. All right. Good morning. Should turn this around because sometimes I step out of the frame.
You know, we forgot to announce the new couple who's worshiping here.
Yes, I told him about it. I'm gonna do that this morning. I've got it on my notes this time, and
Oh, good.
I got up there to preach, and I had the card you gave me.
Just didn't do it.
Just didn't. You look good today. I like that tie. Very candy. All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm so thankful you're here. We're gonna go ahead and get started in our Bible class. If you want to turn over into the book of Job, we're in chapter 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, somewhere around there. I know we covered a little bit of this last week, what's on the slide, and I just want to quickly review it and kind of talk about it. I think I went over something a little bit too quick, and I want to make sure to make that point. And then, like I said last week, chapter 19 really is, man, it's a great highlight of the entire book. It's part of Job's response, and it's one of my most favorite parts. So I wanted to spend more time with it, so we just kind of dismissed a little bit early last week, because because I did not want to rush the last 5 minutes of that class to go through the highlight of the book, so I wanted to spend a little bit more time with it. Well, Job, in his response, first here in chapter 15, 16, 17, I know we talked about this, but I just want to review it with you. He's disappointed in all three of his friends. They've said things, and they just can't muster up to really giving him any worthwhile answer at all. And so what he says to them, he's just very disappointed about it. He feels abandoned. He feels abandoned not just by his friends and men in general, but also he honestly feels abandoned by God in some respects. And so he doesn't understand the fact that he's innocent, but yet no one is sticking by him. It'd be you just feel totally alone, and so that's the way he feels. The verse that goes right along with that, in chapter 16, verses 14 through 17, there's this phrase. He says, "And deep darkness is on my eyelids, although there is no evidence or no violence in my hands, and my prayer is pure." And so that's the contrast. Deep darkness over his eyelids. He says, but my prayer is pure. I'm an innocent person, it's not matching up. And so he feels really bad. And then he says that God is the only true witness. God's really the only one that can testify to what is actually going on. And Job is absolutely correct on this. He's absolutely correct because he's able to say, God knows everything that's going on. Now, he doesn't realize everything that's going on with that statement. Job doesn't know that Satan has been involved in everything that he's lost. He doesn't know that he is being allowed to be going through this terrible trial, that God is allowing that to happen. He doesn't piece that together, but he does know that God is the one who can testify to what actually is happening. And isn't that the truth today? We say things like, God only knows. God only knows what's happening. God's the only one that's got the answer to this problem. We can't figure it out. Well, Job is having the same kind of response. God is the only true witness, is what he says. Then he says that his friends see him as a byword. In other words, almost like he is the poster child. He is the example of an arrogant sinner. That's what that's how they view him. And he says, that's the way you're viewing me. You're looking at me as if I am the example of what an arrogant sinner is. It just doesn't match up to who I really am. And then finally he says, death's the only thing that's going to bring me deliverance. That's the only thing that's going to make me be able to have any kind of end in sight to all of this. And that's what he's expecting. And really, we too realize that. I hope, anyway, we realize that. We always talk about death as the worst thing that could happen to us. But as Christians, death is not the worst thing that happens to us. And so death is our deliverance from this world of turmoil and of hurt and of pain. Death, it truly is that answer. And we should look forward to that. I have a preaching friend of mine who has, just last Sunday, while he's teaching Bible class, has a heart attack. And was in the hospital and was really, really sick. And Brother Moore, he was talking to his sons this week, and he kept saying, guys, no matter what's going to happen to me, I'm going to be fine. Whatever happens, whether I live or I die, I'm going to make it. And that's the words that Paul uses in the book of Philippians. And in a way, Job is kind of alluding to that fact. Death is our deliverance. Death is our answer. And it's not the worst thing. We fear it all the time right now, don't we? We get scared of it right now. And we've talked about this. But death is not the worst thing that happens to Christians. Not at all. The worst thing that can happen to a Christian is for us to leave Christianity and die. That's the worst thing. But to be faithful unto death, you will receive a crown of life. What more could we ask for? That's the great thing about it. So death is our deliverance as well. Well, then you have where Bildad gives this response. And I think that we talked about this, but I feel like maybe I jumped a little bit too quickly through it. And so I kind of want to just review it, and then we'll go on with the rest of what we'll talk about this morning. Bildad seems to become more irritable as he continues his condemnation of Job and in his second speech. And in this speech, he tells Job that his present situation is really just a foretaste of his ultimate fate. Well, gosh, could that be more doom and gloom? You know, what you're going through right now, this is it's just a drop in the bucket to what you're going to have to suffer, and that is a terrible thing to have to say to your friend. It's just a drop in the bucket. There we go. There's this wire back there that is just a little bit touchy. We've tried to fix that, and it just needs to be adjusted back there. Can you adjust it some more? I think the other way. There you go. There you go. Got to fix that. He's coming Thursday to look at our system and make sure it's tweaked right. Okay, in Job 18, verses 5 through 6, Bildad says, "Indeed, the light of the wicked goes out, and the flame of fire gives no light. The light is in his tent is darkened, and his lamp goes out above him." Basically, the power's out. The power's out. You know, everything's out. It's all darkness. You're in your home, and you have no light. You have no light at all. And so it's just a terrible situation. And so what Bildad is saying here, his whole point, make sure I'm keeping up here, is that no one's going to remember Job. That's his point in chapter 18. No one is going to remember Job. This is what God does to the wicked. That's what Bildad's response is. You shouldn't be surprised. No one's going to remember Job. No one's going to remember you. And this is just what God does to the wicked. Now, could Bildad be any more wrong? Now, let's think. How long ago was this story of Job? Well, I don't know exactly. Maybe, 6, 8, 10,000 years ago? I don't know. Something like that. I mean, I don't think that's ridiculous to think about that this is happening. Are we remembering Job? Here we are. All these thousands of years later, and we're reading about him, we're learning from him, we're learning how to manage the crisis situation. And so Bildad is absolutely 100% wrong in this statement, in his point that no one is going to remember him at all. Look what he says in chapter 18. That's very small font, I know that. Just make sure you're in your Bible so you can read along with that. It's pretty small up there. It says, "Memory of him perishes from the earth." That's Bildad talking. "Memory of him perishes from the earth, and he has no name abroad. He is driven from the light into darkness and chased from the inhabited world. He has no offspring or prosperity among his people." And that's true in that moment. He has no offspring. Remember, his kids are gone, right? That's true. So no survivor, nor any survivor where he sojourned. Those in the west are appalled at his fate, and those in the east are seized with horror. Surely such are the dwellings of the wicked, and this is the place of him who does not know God. That's the point. That's the point that Bildad makes. No one's going to remember you, Job, and this is just what God does to the wicked. You have no kids. Nobody's going to remember you. Everybody around the whole area, the whole land, they are appalled at your fate, and they are seized with horror. There's no hope for you, Job. That's what Bildad says. Oh, gosh, that's terrible. I heard something. Yes, sir. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very, very real possibility. Mark is saying that since we know that Satan does certainly work through people, we see that all throughout the Old Testament. We see that in our world today, that Satan uses people to carry out his works. Is it possible that Satan is using Bildad to further discourage, further beat down Job? Sure. I would say that that's a good. The text doesn't tell us that. But there's nothing wrong with looking at that and saying, hey, that's certain, a real possibility that's the case. And maybe he did that with all three of his friends and his wife and he's using everybody around Job to further beat him down emotionally and psychologically even, That's pretty impressive. I didn't hear you, Mark. Say it again. Yes, to get God to get Job to curse God was Satan's ultimate goal. That's absolutely true. So if he could just push at him a little bit further using his friends, then maybe he'll do that. Maybe he'll crack just a little bit further. Yeah, that's a good point. All right, so now we have Job's response. And I love this. This is, like I said, this is where I wanted to spend a little bit more time last week, and I felt like I rushed into that and left out some of those details. So Job's response is this. And I want to just kind of read through this, then we'll cover every bit of it. First of all, my friends have no clue. I'm hated by God and man. I'll be vindicated in the future. I appeal to God, and then he gives a warning to his friends. I warn my friends. So I'm writing this. I put those points up there as if Job is writing this to us, okay? So my friends have no clue. I'm writing this in the first person using those pronouns. So in his isolation, he's rejected by his wife. He's rejected by his friend. And so Job cries out for sympathy, cries out for light and hope. And here we find this great highlight of the book. And he begins this second speech by saying, my friends have no clue. Now, he doesn't say that exactly like that. He's protesting his friend's lack of understanding, as maybe a more scholarly way of saying that. Look at verses 3 through 4 of chapter 19. He says, these 10 times you have insulted me. You are not ashamed to wrong me. Even if I have truly done wrong, my error stays with me. And so he just renews this argument that whatever they think he has done wrong, the truth is that God has punished an innocent man. And he wishes that they would just understand that point. God has punished an innocent man. You have no clue. He says 10 times you have insulted me. Now, it's not. I don't think you could really come up with 10 times and then that's it. You know what I'm saying? Like you wouldn't say, I can count the 10 times. The number 10 is here. I take this as a figure of speech. If I said to you, you have cursed me, you have insulted me 1,000,000 times. Well, no one's going to count out every single time that you've done that to me. But it gives you the impression that this is a lot, okay? Well, the number 10 here, it would be that same kind of argument here with Job. You have insulted me 10 times. Now, not literally, but you've insulted me over and over and over again, enough to where I've lost count, and it's probably like 10 times. And so that's the idea behind that, okay? That same kind of, that's in your book of Revelation when Matthew's studying it on Wednesday nights. Numbers are used that way as well, in figurative ways. Not a literal thing, but just giving us a clue to either tell us that there's a lot or a very specific amount, but not necessarily an amount that we can count, So anyway, numbers are used throughout the Bible like that, and here I think we find that in Job, where he's saying 10 times you've insulted me. And he says, even if I have, and I've highlighted that and bolded that in my Bible, even if I have truly done wrong, my error stays with me. And so he said, I'm innocent. And he says, if you keep reading with me, verses 5 through 6, he says, if indeed you exalt yourself against me and prove my disgrace to me, know then that God has wronged me and has surrounded me with his net. God, even if I have done wrong, it's not matching up with the punishment that I am having to go through. It's not matching up. Yes, sir. Why is his friends pointing his fingers at him? Yeah. Yeah. I think it's human nature. We do that. When someone goes through, we try to figure out, we try to fix it for them, and we have a tendency to say, well, I've got the answers for what you're going through, And here we see, and I've mentioned this before, each one of his friends kind of have different personalities, and so you have the different responses from each one of them and what their answers are, a little bit different from each other. They're all saying the same thing, that Job has done wrong, and that's why he's having to suffer the way he is. Yeah, right. Right. LB says the only way I like his friends is when he first meets them, when they're quiet, and that's a good point. Yeah, 7 days they were quiet. That was the only thing they did right there. And that's a good point, because when someone's going through a difficult time in your life, you're going through something. Sometimes if you're counseling somebody that's going through something, that's what I mean to say. If you're counseling somebody that's going through something, you don't need to think that you have to have an answer to it. You can actually just be there. Be in their presence. Hold their hand. Put your arm around them. Love on them. And you don't have to say a word. And a lot of times, when we do start saying things, that's when it gets a little bit more difficult. And sometimes we don't say the right things. I've been guilty of that. Anybody else ever been guilty of saying the wrong thing? Boy, have I ever. And I don't know. So sometimes people say, well, why isn't Alex saying anything? He's the preacher. He should be able to say something. Well, sometimes I don't know what to say. I just don't. I don't have an answer to anything at all. And so it's probably best for me not to say anything. I need to learn that lesson more often anyway. In my own personality, that's me. Sometimes I find myself being Bildad or Zophar, the old goat, Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So Jesse says sometimes we give advice and we say the wrong thing, and then they make a decision based upon that wrong advice. Yeah, that's right. We just need to be careful with our words. I think that's in the Bible somewhere. I don't know. Y'all think it's in there? It is, isn't it? Be careful. The tongue is a fire, right? All right, so then he says, I will be vindicated in the future. I'll be vindicated in the future. He sees himself as being despised by both God and man, and this is a true low point in Job's thoughts. How can it get any worse, kind of thing? Notice what he says in verses 23 and 24. He says, he breaks me down on every side, and I am gone. He has uprooted my hope like a tree. He has removed my brothers far from me, and my acquaintances have completely turned away from me. Boy, that is despair. He is just really, really hurting, just in really bad shape. I didn't read the right verses, did I? No, I didn't. I can't remember where that's at. Let me look real quick. But we're in chapter 19. I bet you it's close to 4 and 5. Let's see. I didn't hear you. 19? 10. Yes. Oh, yeah, that's right. So he continues that same thought, how God has done that. That's going back to that last point. I had a note in there to read that one. Going back to that last point of where he feels hated by God. He, talking about God, has broken him down on every side, uprooted his hope like a tree. I've been thinking about this. I saw a tree not that long ago. It looked like, I feel like when I saw this tree, it was actually in the out at the deer lease. I saw this tree and I thought it was uprooted. It was just pulled over and I saw the roots. And I thought, the last time I was out here, I think that tree was standing. And I kept looking at it and I kept thinking, I wonder what happened. And I've been sitting in this deer stand and I've been thinking, I would hate for a tree to fall right now in front of me or near me or on me while I'm sitting here. And wind was blowing the other day when I was out there, and I kept thinking, boy, these trees, boy, as strong as that we think that they are, it doesn't take much for them really to be toppled over. And it started making me think about that. Job felt secure. He had all these great possessions, had a great family, and all of a sudden it's been uprooted. And he's feeling despair. And it is depression, LB. It's depression. He's feeling really, really down. All right, now to the point that I was wanting to make. I'll be vindicated in the future. Verses 23 through 24. He says, "Oh, that my words were written. Oh, that they were recorded in a book, that with an iron stylus and lead, that they were engraved in the rock forever." Now, wait a minute. That's exactly what happened. We're reading it. And so, yeah, Job is vindicated in the future, even if Job never got anything back. He never got all the things restored back to him. We would look back at this and say, look, we can learn from Job. We can learn how to manage through a crisis situation based upon the way that Job did. He never lost his faith. It wavered, it went up and down for sure, but I can identify with that. I've been there. I've been at those low points, and I've been at those high points too. And so I can understand, I can learn from Job. So even if he never got everything back that he lost, I can still learn from him. Why? Because it was written in a book. It was recorded. And he says, with an iron stylus and lead. Now look at that. The idea is that it's been written down for permanency. Iron stylus and lead. That they were engraved in the rock. How long? What does he say? Forever. Well, here it is. Right here for us to read from in the Word of God. And so he claims that if his defense and his appeal is preserved, written down, someone in the future, generations from now, would read it and they'd understand, and that would bring him vindication. That's what we're here today, able to accomplish exactly what Job wrote about right here. Reading the words. Not just his words, not just the friend's perspective, but we get to see the big picture and see even the words of Satan, even the words of God in this conversation. We get to see exactly what's going on. And so that's why it's so good for us to be able to learn from Job how to manage a crisis situation. All right, then he appeals to God. This is verse 25. He makes his final appeal to God himself, since he is convicted that neither of his friends in the present nor his appeals to prosperity will succeed in the end. You know, he says, as for me, this is verse 25, yet as for me, I know that my Redeemer lives. And at the last, he will take his stand on the earth. Now, I don't know. I love this. I love it. We sing that song. I know that my Redeemer lives and never. Oh, man. That song is special to me. I think it was the first song I ever led in the public worship with now it's probably Jesus Loves Me, but I remember standing, I remember being taught how to lead the song, I Know My Redeemer Lives. I would stand there with my dad, he'd hold me in his arms, and he would motion, and I was standing there in worship, or being held even, as a toddler. And I remember that was one of the first songs. So when I read this coming right from Job and his words, I know that my Redeemer lives, it rings true in my heart. Now, I know a little bit more probably than Job does. When he writes this right here, or when he says these words and says, I know my Redeemer lives, I don't know if Job really understood the aspect and the meaning behind those words. He knew that God was his Redeemer, I'm sure. He knew that God is the provider of things for him, the one that's going to get him through those things. That's what a Redeemer does. And Job is certainly redeemed by the end of the book. We see that. But I don't know if he really knew the implication of those words, because now we look back to that, and who do you think of when you hear the word Redeemer? Who do you think of? Jesus. When you hear the word Redeemer, you think of Jesus. Now, Job didn't think of Jesus. Probably not. I really doubt it. But that's what I think of when I hear the word Redeemer. Then it says, Redeemer? I don't know. I hadn't even thought about that. Redeemer is someone that restores. I guess the best way of thinking about it. Restores, brings back, reconciliator. I don't know. I hadn't thought about that. But that's who Jesus is. He's one that puts us back in the right relationship with God. You know? All right, so Jesus is this Redeemer for us. We look back at it, and does he truly live? Oh, man. There's another song we sing. He lives, Christ Jesus lives today. He walks with me and talks with me. Yeah, he lives. Of course he lives. My Redeemer lives. And at last he will take his stand on the earth. And I don't know. I think about Jesus in this phrase. He takes his stand on the earth. Jesus, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We beheld his glory, the glory of the only begotten, full of grace and truth. John chapter 1 and verse 14. You know, it's Jesus. He was there. He took a stand on the earth, and he died for us. That's where his redeeming act happened, right here on this earth. And at last he will take his stand on the earth. I don't know if Job really understood the implications of what he says here. But now looking back at it, it's easy for me to take that statement and apply it into my own life. And so when I'm going through a crisis and I'm trying to manage my crisis, I can learn from Job and say, as for me, I don't know about you, but as for me, I know that my Redeemer lives. And at last, he will take his stand on the earth. And he has taken his stand on the earth. That redeeming act, that's what it's the apex of all of human history. It's everything. So in other words, you know, Job, he believes that God alone is responsible for his circumstances, and God alone will be able to redeem him. He can handle everything. You know, and it's in this statement, we see somewhat of a shift in Job's thinking at the lowest point. Remember, he says he feels rejected by God. He feels rejected by men. And Job continues to hope in God. Not just believe that he is, but he trusts that he'll be able to save Job in some way or another. He believes it. So important. Job, and that's an important thing. You know, a lot of times we look at the book of Job and we can find a lot of neat Christian evidences that are there. You know, the existence of God, and we see that in the book of Job. But Job doesn't really waver whether God exists. He believes that for sure. He doesn't understand everything, but he does trust him. He does have faith that God is going to get him through it. And so he appeals to him. Now he finishes this warning, or he finishes this chapter, verses 28 and 29, with this warning for his three friends. He says, if you say, how shall we persecute him? And what pretext for a case against him can we find? Then be afraid of the sword for yourselves. For wrath brings the punishment of the sword, so that you may know there is judgment. And so his warning to his friends is, well, we say it like this in today's world: you better be careful. What goes around comes around. And so you better be careful. If you're going to, hey, listen, if you think that I'm so guilty, if I've done something wrong, well, get ready. When you've done something wrong, you should be facing the same kind of thing that I'm facing. If you think that I've done something wrong, this is Job speaking. If you think that I've done something wrong, well, get ready, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, because you're going to face the same thing. You know that there's a judgment. You be afraid of the sword for yourselves, is what he says. Get ready. Anyway, I love this chapter. It is a climax of the whole book. It is a highlight of the whole thing. Any questions or anything about chapter 19? I know I spent more time there, but I wanted to. It was intentional to spend a little bit more time in that chapter. Any questions or comments at all? Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I wish I knew because that's a really good point, Gary, and I don't know the actual, there's a terminology for that in the court of law of when a witness gives false testimony. Perjury. That's it. That's exactly what it is. So that's a good point right here to make right there. That hey, you're giving false testimony and you're going to face the same kind of thing. That's a good point. Yes, Mark. Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, that's exactly right, Mark. We look back at Job and we say, boy, if he can make it through that, I need to make it through it as well, and I should be able to do that, you know. It's inspiring to look back at that. And Mark's right. Mark's saying that we look at some people that have gone through tough times even in our own church family, right? Or in our own community, and we think, boy, they are strong. They are faithful. And if I could only be like them, if I could be as strong as they are, that's inspiring. And Job serves that purpose for us. Good point. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Zophar. I just want to hit a couple things here, and we'll conclude for today. I think I've got about 10 minutes or so left. I think Bill will give me a 5-minute warning or so, so just look for that. Let's talk a little bit about what Zophar has to say. I don't know if I advanced. Oh, good. So Zophar, this is chapter 20 through 1 through 29. This friend merely just repeats his argument that he's already given, that Job's affliction is a result of sin, but he doubts his own theory and argument for just a moment, and we'll see that in what he says. Look at verses 2 and 3. He says, "Therefore my disquieting thoughts make me respond, even because of my inward agitation. I listened to the reprimand which insults me, and the spirit of my understanding makes me answer." And so Job has some anxious thoughts. I'm sorry, not Job. Zophar has some anxious thoughts about Job's comments. And it shows that he's somewhat shaken in his position momentarily. However, in the next few verses, we see that he just reverts back to his initial argument, you know. But notice what he says, my disquieting thoughts, my anxious thoughts, even because of my inward agitation, you know. He's just thinking, I'm questioning this just a little bit, you know. But then he goes right back to his same kind of thing. So look at verse 27 through 29. I know we're jumping a lot, but that's just the name. Like I said, I can't cover every single verse. I'm hoping you're reading ahead. I can't cover every verse in the book of Job, but we'll hit some of these high points. I may have jumped a little bit there. Notice what it says, verse 27 and 29. The heavens will reveal his guilt. There it is, back again. Same stuff he's always been saying. And the earth will rise up against him. The increase of his house will disappear. His possessions will flow away on the day of his anger. This is a wicked person's portion from God. The inheritance decree to him by God. So again, it's just going right back to what he's already been saying. I keep advancing there, but not there. So his point is, no matter how favored Job may be, he has sinned, no matter what. And so Zophar continues to argue that, yes, ma'am. Yeah, yeah, sure, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. When he says those things, uh, my version says, "Do you know this from old? From the," notice this word, establishment of man. From the very beginning, it's been this way. Yeah, that's a good point to bring out. Yeah. Yes, sir. Oh, absolutely. They all three of them are very, very much calling him a hypocrite because they think that Job won't just confess and repent, and so they're saying you're just not living up to it. You know. All right. So Zophar continues to argue that no matter how rich, no matter how favored or how high of a position one has, if he sins, somehow he will be brought low. And he demonstrates this while Job's arguments and his claims have affected him. He shows that he does not know any more than Job knows. All of the circumstances surrounding his situation. But think about all three of the friends and Job. They don't know any more than each other, really. They don't know the big picture. And so he rejects Job's declaration that he's an innocent man who still trusts God to vindicate him. So then Job's question, okay? This is chapter 21. Yeah, here we go. Make sure I've gotten this all matched up here. Job questions, why do the wicked still live then? Okay, so if the wicked are punished for doing wicked, then why do we still have wicked people? They should be punished. They should all die right then, if that's the case. But we have wicked people all around us. So all wicked people should be like Job, if that's the case. If people are punished for what they've done wrong, that every single wicked person in the world at Job's time should have nothing. And they should all have boils, and they should all suffer, and they should have nothing. And Job says, why are they still here? Why are they here? Notice what he says, verse 7 and 9 of chapter 21. Why do the wicked still live? They grow old, they become very powerful, their descendants endure with them in their sight and their offspring, before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, and the rod of God is not on them. And don't you feel that way even today? We think, you look around, you think, why is it that wicked people can still have all the possessions and riches all around us? If God would only give good people, if God would just give good people all the things, we could handle all this and we could do it. And that is not the way that the world works. Not the way the world works. Are there rich, wicked people today? Duh. Of course there is. There are. They're everywhere. Are there rich, good people today? Yes, there are. Are there poor, good people today? Absolutely. Are there poor, wicked people today? All right, so based upon that, every argument that the friends have about how God punishes the wicked is wrong. It doesn't work like that. And we see that today, and that's what Job's point is here in verses 7 and 9. The wicked still live. They're still here. They got nice houses. The rod of God is not on them. They seem to live and prosper without any kind of consequences at all. And then he questions the wisdom in the ages, the law of retribution that God blesses and punishes in real time, by pointing out those common examples that contradict this ancient wisdom. Does God really repay with retribution? That's his question. And he also notes, this is an important part right here, he questions, does guilt pass down to another generation? This idea of hereditary guilt being passed down. True, or, sons do not bear the guilt or the punishment of the sins of the father, which is also a point that's made by the prophet Ezekiel. Ezekiel 18, verse 20. That Ezekiel, when he writes that in 600 B.C., some people have thought, well, that's about maybe the time that the story of Job was written down. Some people have thought that maybe the story of Job was passed down orally for all these years, and then finally, around 600, it was written down. And maybe that's the case. Verses 19 through 26 of chapter 21. Let's read that for just a moment. 19 through 26 says, you say God saves up a person's wrongdoing for his sons. Let God repay him so that he may know it. Let his own eyes see the destruction. Let him drink of the wrath of the Almighty. For what does he care about his household after him? Notice that. His household after him, that passing down. When the number of his months is at an end, can anyone teach God's knowledge, and that he judges those on high? One dies in his full strength. Now notice this. Being wholly undisturbed and at ease, his sides are filled with fat, and the marrow of his bones is wet. While another dies with a bitter soul, never even tasting anything good. Together they lie down in the dust, and maggots cover them. Ugh. You know what he's saying? Both the rich and the blessed, and the good and the innocent, and the poor and the whoever, everyone dies. Everybody ends up in the ground, in the dust, and maggots eat them. That's just the reality of life. Everybody. And his point is that is so simple, no matter what. All right, let's, this is the last slide. Just a real quick point about Job. Sometimes the innocent suffer and the wicked go free. But one day God will judge both according to their actions and his wisdom, not man's wisdom. Man would say, the good get good things, and the bad get bad things, and if you sin at all, then you should be punished for it. That's man's response a lot of times. But God's going to judge in his own wisdom. Because I've done bad things. Have you? Have you done things that you're ashamed of? And boy, am I ever thankful that in God's wisdom, the way that he judges is with grace and mercy and true godly justice. He sees the big picture, and I'm thankful for that. All right, thank you so much. We'll pick up next week.